Hi friends! In this video I'm going to show you how to weave in your ends in crochet. So I've been working on this swatch showing you how to do color changes, and I'm finished with it. So I first need to start by closing off my work, because I still have this active loop on my hook. I need to close that. This is basically a bind off in crochet. So I like to start by just making that loop a little bit bigger so I can take my hook out. And you're going to need a pair of snips or scissors, and you can cut yourself a tail, maybe like 5 or 6 inches long. Go ahead and cut your yarn. And then we've got to pull this tail through these loops so that we don't have a loop anymore, we just have a tail. So one of these ends can pull, just pull that through, all the way through, so that it's completely out. And basically that's it, that's our bind off. Now our work is self-contained and it really shouldn't come undone, except if you like really got in there to pull out those loops. All right, so we're gonna weave in. I'm first gonna start by showing you how to weave in your ends. So where you just finished and where you started. This is the tail from my slip knot. We'll start by showing you that, and then I'll show you how to weave in ends if you're in the middle of your crochet because you did some color work. So you're gonna need a needle, a tapestry needle usually. So I like the ones that are bent at the tip, and you want to make sure you have a big eye to fit various size yarns, and you also don't want it to be sharp on the end, it's blunt. And here's my trick for threading yarn through the eye of a needle. I like to drape the yarn over the needle and pinch it right at the bottom, slide it off, and then you have a nice flat loop with no frayed edges to then stick through the eye of your needle. And you want to leave yourself a short tail. It doesn't need to be long. I also, when I'm holding my needle, I like to pinch right where the yarn is coming through the eye. All right, so because I'm right-handed, I need to work right to left. So I have to flip my work over to the other side. If you're left-handed, you can work left to right or whatever is most comfortable for you, but this feels natural for me, right to left. So this is the end of my work. I should have some really nice looking V's on the top of my work. And that's basically where we're going to be loop-de-looping this tail through to hide our end in, to hide our tail. But first, I like to kind of like close this last loop here. It's a little bit flimsy and loose. So I first like to basically send the yarn down and around, and I'm gonna come up through, so I'm heading towards the top of my work. I'm going to come up through this little loop that sits at the base, and also I'm going to come up through my last stitch, my last V, just to sort of neatly end this row. It feels a little bit more secure to me that way. Okay, so once I've done that, now I'm just going to loop-de-loop this yarn through my stitches, through my V's. And for the top, you're going to always come down through a V. So if you notice here, I'm coming up through a V, so I can just kind of jump over to the next stitch, just coming down through the V and just catching one bar, coming down. Okay. And then I'm going to move down to my next stitch, and the direction is always the same. I'm always coming down from the top, and I'm splitting the V, and I'm just catching one bar of the V. I'm always coming top down. Oops, got caught on the end there. Top down. Next stitch, split the V, top down. And as you get comfortable with this, and as it starts to make more sense, like what you're doing, you can do what I call the loop-de-loop. So as long as you're always coming down from the top for this last row, you can come down from the top and then make a big circle back up, go into the next stitch, top down, big circle, top down, and you can catch several stitches on your hook at one time. It goes a little bit faster. And then you can pull your yarn through. And if you want, and then, you kind of pull on it so that it's not too tight. You don't want to shrink your work with your weaving in. If you want, for extra security, you can flip your work over and go back the other way. And oops, great. Pull that a little tighter there. There we go. And then you'll come up, it's a little bit different on this side. From this way, you'll come up from the bottom. Whatever you did on the previous side, you do the opposite. So the other side, I went top down. This time I'm going to go bottom up. And then I can also do my, oops, my loop-de-loop. I'm always coming bottom up, and I'm going through the V and go loop-de-loop-de-loop. I don't know how much yarn I have left, so I'll stop there. So once you feel like it's secure enough and you can, you know, tug on everything, readjust, it's pretty well hidden, right? Like it's a little bit bulkier than it was before, but the tail is following the natural direction of the stitches, of the yarn going through the stitches. So it's pretty well hidden. And then you can snip this yarn here. And this end will kind of naturally just disappear into all of your stitches there. So that's how you do, that's how you weave in an end at the end of your work, like in the very last row you did. Let's talk about how to weave in the tail from your slip knot. It's a little different. So first, go ahead and get this set up over your, get this threaded onto the eye of your needle. And since I have to go right to left, I'm just going to flip my work. So now the bottom is at the top. These are my chains where I worked my first row. And again, right to left since I'm right-handed. So if you're a beginner, your chains might look like this. They kind of just look like scallops or little waves. And again, we're just going to follow the natural line of our stitches. So I'm first going to, of our chains, I should say. I'm first going to send my needle down through this, underneath this first scallop, this first wave. Like that, and then move down to my next chain, same direction. If I'm going top down, it's the same direction the whole way across. And you can also do the loop-de-loop on this. So basically I'm making like big circles. Oops, caught something extra there. Big circles all the way across. And I had a shorter tail here, so I guess I can just leave it there. If you wanted, you could wrap this around to the other side and, you know, do some more loop-de-looping. I think it would be the opposite direction. You'd probably go, no, you'd probably go in the same direction, top down. But I don't have a long enough tail, so I'm just going to cut it here. But if you're getting a little extra security, if you want extra security, you can do the second round, go back, retrace your steps. But otherwise, you can just snip your yarn. And then you can kind of give it like a little tug just to make sure everything settles in really nicely there. So that is how to weave in ends at the start and the finish. Let's talk about how to weave in the ends in the middle of your work, because it is a little bit different. I'm going to start with the pink color. So let's get the yarn threaded onto the eye of our needle, and then this is where there really is no right or wrong way. Whatever you feel like is best and whatever you feel like hides the yarn and makes it secure, that's fine. I like to send the yarn through the feet of my stitches. So by feet, I mean the two loops that every stitch has at the base. These two loops are going through a stitch from the previous row, from the row below it. I call them the feet, because it's the bottom of the stitch. And I just send it through, like literally send it through. The first stitch to the next stitch, all the way across. It's just going right through them. And it's kind of like running parallel to the stitches from the row below. You can pull through and just make sure it's not pulling too tight. As soon as I'm like halfway through, or, you know, like maybe 3 or 4 inches in, then I can go back, but this time I can't go in the same direction. I can actually like catch the stitches from the row below. So, sorry, my mailman's coming, so you might hear his radio. So now I caught this loop here. This is a stitch from my previous row, and now I can go back through the little feet of a stitch, the feet of a double crochet. And then I also came through another stitch that's hiding inside this row, come through the next 2 feet. Here's my next stitch. Like, I'm really kind of making it up as I go. As long as I feel like it's secure, then it's not wrong, right? And as long as it's hiding too. Like, you really can barely see, unless you're looking really hard, you can't see that tail being woven in. But basically I went in a few inches and then I retraced my steps, but taking a slightly different path. And then I can cut that tail too. And let's do the other one. So again, I like to work right to left. So let's get this threaded onto my needle. And then for this one, since I did some fancy color work, I want to make sure that I'm going through the white, the same color. But if you notice, the tail's kind of headed downward. So I guess first I'd like to sort of send it up, and I'm just going to follow this loop here. So I'm just going to go up and come through a loop just to hold it in place, like so. I can totally weave in the end right through here, go through these feet, but you might see it against the pink. So I might even go up a little bit more. And I'm just gonna like follow some of these loops here and just kind of hide this inside some loops while I move up the side, right? It's really well hidden. And then I'm gonna send the tail through these feet here, because at least there's white on all sides of it, and that way it's pretty nicely hidden. So I'm just going through my feet, the feet of my stitches, turn my work around, because now I'm going to go back the other way, retrace my steps, but like with a slightly different path. So if you remember, we went down, this is a stitch from the row below where I was just working. So I'm just going to go through there, and then you can come up through these feet. Here's another stitch that I'm going through, and then go through the feet again, come down through this stitch. Again, no right or wrong. If it feels good and it's hidden and it feels secure, then it's probably right. It's probably good enough. And just make sure you don't pull too tight. You don't want to warp your work. And again, it's pretty well hidden. It's a little bit bulkier than the areas around it, but I'm okay with that. And also what's important is it's secure. Our tail's woven in. And then cut off your excess. And that's pretty much it. The thing to keep in mind is there's no right or wrong. As long as it feels secure and the tails are pretty well hidden, then I'd say you're doing a good job weaving in your ends. Happy making!